My name is Linda Martin. After I retired, I sold my house in Vermont, the one with the creaky porch and the birch tree that split after the storm in '98. I used the money to move closer to my son, Ethan, and his wife, Amber. They had just had a baby boy, Jake. My first grandchild. Amber called me a blessing. Like a second mom, she said. I took care of Jake during the week while they worked. I brought soup when they were sick. I bought diapers, wipes, even a jogging stroller they couldn't afford. When they found their dream starter home, I offered part of my home sale to help with the down payment. They promised I'd always have a place with them. From the outside, everything looked whole. Family dinners every Sunday. Walks in the park. Holiday cards with all our names on them. I would have believed it myself, if not for one afternoon in late spring. I had just set a casserole in the oven when I heard Amber on the phone in the hallway, speaking low and fast. She didn't know I was home early. Her voice was clipped. Soon this will all change. I'm done pretending to be grateful. She laughed after that. A short, brittle sound. Froze. My hands still smelled of garlic and thyme. I stayed perfectly still, listening to nothing and everything. Later that night she hugged me goodbye and thanked me for dinner. Smiled back. And said nothing. I didn't tell Ethan about what I'd overheard that day in the hallway. I told myself I had misinterpreted it. That maybe Amber was tired or joking. That I was being sensitive. But the seed was planted. And like all things left unattended, it began to grow. First, the changes were small. Amber stopped saying thank you. She used to send little texts. You're a lifesaver. Or thanks for folding the laundry. Those disappeared. Then came the silence. Expectation without acknowledgement. I noticed it one Friday afternoon when I returned from the grocery store. I had picked up almond milk, the kind she liked, even though I preferred whole. I placed it on the counter and said, "Got your milk?" She looked up from her laptop and said nothing. Just pushed her AirPods deeper into her ears. The next day it was the laundry. "You folded Ethan's shirts wrong," she said, frowning at the pile I'd neatly arranged on their bed. "He likes them with the sleeves tucked in." "No, please." No smile. Just correction like I was a poorly trained maid. A week later I made soup, chicken with thyme and carrots. Jake had a cold, and I remembered it being his comfort food. At dinner, Amber sniffed the air and wrinkled her nose. "That smells strong," she said. Lucas used to hate that smell in the house. Lucas was her dog, who died 3 years ago. Ethan noticed, I think. Once or twice he murmured a quiet, "Sorry, Mom." But it always came too late, too soft, like an afterthought he wasn't sure he was allowed to say. Then came the day I overheard them talking. They were in their bedroom. I was gathering towels from the hallway closet when I heard Ethan say, "She seems, I don't know, sad lately." Amber's voice was sharp and fast. "Because she has nothing to do. She just sits around. Is lazy. We feed her, house her, and put up with her." There was silence. Then Ethan's voice, quieter. "She raised me." Amber laughed, but there was no joy in it. "Yeah, and now she's cashing in on it." That night I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing the word lazy loop in my head. I had built a life for Ethan. Supported his college dreams. Helped him through a breakup that left him sobbing on my kitchen floor. I had moved to this city. Left behind my garden, my friends, my community, because I thought he wanted me close. 'Cause I wanted to be useful. But now, apparently I was a bill they tolerated. Relic. A woman who folded shirts wrong. The next week, Amber stopped inviting me to Sunday brunches. They'd leave without a word and come back with takeout boxes I was never offered. I saw a receipt once. $1.24 at some downtown cafe. My name wasn't on the order. I tried not to mind. I told myself to be gracious. But that seed, that quiet thing Amber had planted, had grown into a vine wrapping around my chest. Then one afternoon I heard her on the phone again. She was walking past the guest room, my room. I had the door open a crack. "She's still here," Amber whispered. "It's like she thinks this is her house. I keep trying to drop hints." Then a soft laugh. I mean, how do you get rid of someone who thinks you owe them just because they changed your diapers once? That night, I packed up the baby photos I kept by my bed. The ones of Jake in his Halloween lion costume. The ones Ethan gave me last Mother's Day, before everything shifted. Put them in a drawer. I didn't want to look at them anymore. I started waking up early. Earlier than usual. Before anyone else in the house. I didn't want to hear their voices. I didn't want to smell Amber's perfume in the hallway. That synthetic vanilla that clung to everything. Instead, I sat by the kitchen window with my coffee and a book I never really read. I stared at the garden, the one I had started, tended, coaxed into life. Now it looked too neat. Someone had pulled up the wildflowers, replaced them with potted succulents. Low maintenance, Amber had said. Easier. Like me, I thought. Every corner of the house had changed. My mug had disappeared from the cupboard. The towel I used for my hair was replaced with a smaller, thinner one. Jake's drawings were gone from the fridge. My framed photo with him at the zoo, the one where we wore matching hats, had been moved to the guest room. Out of sight. I stayed quiet. I said nothing. But something inside me began to calcify. Then, one afternoon, Amber returned from the salon and found me folding towels on the couch. She looked at me and said flatly, "Could you not do that here? We're having guests and it looks cluttered." "No please. No thank you. Just expectation." I took the towels and walked to my room. Closed the door. That night I found my old journal. The one I'd packed from my Vermont house. I hadn't opened it since the move. I read entries from years ago, about hiking trails, baking classes, mornings spent with my book club. I didn't recognize the woman in those pages. She sounded free. I went to bed with the journal beside me, open to a blank page. I didn't write in it. Not yet. But I would. And when I did, it wouldn't be about this house. Or this silence. It would be about becoming someone again. Someone who wasn't just useful. For my 65th birthday, I baked a cake. 2 layers, vanilla with raspberry jam. Just like the one I made for Ethan's 10th when he cried because the store-bought one melted in the car. I cleaned the kitchen, set the table, even pulled out the cloth napkins I hadn't used in years. Jake helped me put little candles into place. 6, then 5, then a single one in the middle, because he liked the idea of a magic candle. I didn't tell him there'd be no one else coming. I didn't know that yet. They said they'd come home early. Amber had mentioned something about a lunch, but she promised they'd be back by 5. I lit the candles at 5:30. By 6, the frosting had begun to sweat in the humidity. Kept checking my phone. By 7 I understood. They weren't coming. I didn't cry. I turned off the lights, covered the cake, and placed it gently into the fridge. I blew out the candles myself. The magic one flickered longer than the rest. The next morning, scrolling through Facebook out of habit, I saw Amber's post. Photo of them on a yacht. Her, Ethan, and Jake, all in white linen. The caption read, "Starting fresh. New name, new city, new everything." I stared at the image. The sun behind them. Jake's hair pushed back by the wind. Ethan holding Amber's waist. There was no trace of me. Not in the caption, not in the comments, not even in Jake's hand, which held a drink with a tiny umbrella I'd bought him for his birthday last year. I texted Ethan. He replied after 4 hours. "Mom, I didn't know she filed the papers. I just needed to go with her. Please give me time." Filed the papers. I reread that part again and again. Divorce papers. Custody. Name change. No explanation. No warning. No invitation. While I was setting napkins, lighting candles, waiting by the window, they were leaving. Starting over. Without me. I spent the day in silence. Midi. Sat on the porch. Watched the neighbor's dog chase a butterfly. Life kept moving. It always does. That evening, I opened the fridge and stared at the cake. Took it out. Sliced a piece. Sat at the table and ate slowly. It was a good cake. Wheat. Not too dense. A little uneven on one side. Just like the life I had built here. The next week was a blur. Amber removed me from the shared grocery list. Jake's school notifications stopped arriving. The emergency contact form I once filled out at the pediatrician's office had been updated. I found out when I called to check if he was still taking his allergy meds. "I'm sorry, Ms. Martin. That information is now private." Ms. Martin. Not Linda. Not Grandma. Not anymore. Then, on a Thursday afternoon, I heard a knock at the door. A man stood there, mid-30s, wearing a worn jacket and holding a folder. He introduced himself as Jordan Walker. "I believe I'm Jake's biological father," he said. And blinked. "Excuse me. Amber," back then she was Marcy Winters, lived with me for 3 years. She left one day and never came back. I didn't know she was pregnant. A few weeks ago, I saw a picture on social media. And something just clicked. He showed me the folder. Photos. Letters. Printed DNA report. I took a test. Found a cousin of hers through one of those ancestry sites. She confirmed the connection. The test confirms the rest. The document showed a 99% match. I sat down. The room tilted. I felt like I had stepped into someone else's story. Amber, Marcy, had lied to us all. Reinvented herself, changed her name, her city, her story. And now she was trying to do it again. I had no doubt she'd erase me as easily as she'd erased Jordan. Rewrite the story to suit whatever came next. But this time I was not going to let her. I thanked Jordan for coming. Promised him I'd be in touch. That night, I pulled out the old file box from under my bed. It had the house deed, emails about the down payment, a folder of receipts. I opened a new folder, labeled it Truth, and slid Jordan's documents inside. Because truth is quieter than rage. But it cuts deeper. And Amber had underestimated the wrong woman. The next morning I called a lawyer. Not the kind that advertises on benches. A woman named Elaine Gordon, who handled quiet matters with a sharp eye and a steady hand. She didn't blink when I told her the story. She only asked questions. "Do you have proof of your financial contribution to the house? Do you have records of your involvement in Jake's life? Would you be willing to go to court?" Paused, then nodded. "Then we begin," she said. We filed for grandparent visitation rights. Maine law allowed it, especially when a grandparent had acted in loco parentis, which Elaine explained meant, in the place of a parent. I had picked Jake up from school, taken him to doctor's appointments, been present more often than either of his actual parents. We also froze the deed to the house. Since I had contributed to the down payment, I had legal grounds to block any sale or refinance without my signature. Amber couldn't run this time. Not without tripping over the paperwork. Elaine was careful. She never promised easy. Only fair. "This will be slow," she warned me. "They will push back. They may smear you. Be ready." I told her I already was. Meanwhile, I began documenting everything. I kept a journal, logged messages, printed emails. Jordan shared more of his history. Old photos with Amber. No, Marcy. At a music festival, smiling with a beer in hand. None of the polished filters she used now. There was something rougher about her, younger. Unmasked. He showed me an ultrasound photo dated a month before she disappeared. Scribbled in the corner was, "Baby W." "She told me she had a miscarriage," he said quietly. "I grieved that loss for years." He nodded. I didn't know what to say. This woman had sculpted lies with such precision that we'd all lived in the shadows of her versions. But truth has a shape. And once it's seen, it can't be unseen. When Amber found out about the court filing, she called Ethan. He texted me later. "She says you're making things worse. That Jake's confused. That we need to handle this privately." I didn't reply. Because I wasn't confused. And I wasn't private property. Later that week I got a letter. No stamp. Just placed at the door. Inside, Amber had written, "You have no idea what you're doing. You're tearing this family apart. Do you want Jake to grow up watching everyone fight? Do you want him to think you're the reason everything broke? Because that's where this is headed." There was no signature. Just a line at the bottom. Stop this. Now. I folded the letter and placed it in the folder labeled Truth. Elaine read it and nodded. Keep everything. She's rattled. She was more than rattled. She was unraveling. That weekend I got a call from Ethan's aunt, Meredith. Amber says you've been unstable, she said gently. That you're acting out of grief or something. She says you need help. I let her speak. Then I said, if you want to know what's really happening, come see me. Meredith did. I laid out the folder. Showed her the photos, the DNA results, the texts. Her hands trembled as she read. I had no idea, she whispered. Most people don't, I said. The next week, Amber tried again. This time, she wrote an open email to the extended family, painting me as controlling, manipulative, bitter. She accused me of trying to steal Jake. Said I was jealous of her role as a mother. That I'd always wanted to replace her. Elaine said not to respond. Let people pick their side. Truth needs no defense. Still it hurt. Reading my own son's silence in that email thread. Watching relatives I hadn't seen in years react with shock, confusion, sometimes judgment. But some reached out. A cousin in New Hampshire emailed me. I always knew something was off. I'm so sorry you're going through this. Another sent flowers. No note. And Ethan, he didn't write. Not yet. But one night, just past midnight, I saw his name in my inbox. No subject. Just a line. Is it true? About Jake. I stared at it a long time. Then I forwarded him the DNA results. No commentary. No plea. Just the truth. And let it speak for itself. The house felt colder after that. Not in temperature but in tone. Like it no longer held echoes, only silence. I spent mornings filing documents with Elaine, afternoons logging timestamps, and evenings in my garden, pruning what remained of the summer herbs. I gave up on trying to keep the basil alive. Some things refuse to stay no matter how much water you give them. 2 weeks after Ethan's message, he knocked on my door. He didn't call first. He looked tired. Not worn, just dulled. Like someone who had been living inside someone else's decisions. I read it, he said. All of it. The DNA test. The dates. The letters. He sat on the porch swing where he used to sit with Jake in his lap, pointing at clouds. Why didn't she tell me? I didn't answer. Some questions weren't looking for words. Just there. She wants to move again. Said there's a job for her in Arizona. Said I can come or stay. He nodded. He looked at me. I can't leave Jake. Then don't, I said. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was the beginning of something quieter. A space where truth could breathe. The next week, Amber filed for sole custody. She framed it as protection. A stable environment, she wrote, away from toxic influences. She accused me of creating confusion, of interfering in parental boundaries, of manipulating Ethan. Elaine handled it with surgical calm. We file a motion to intervene, she said. With Jordan's affidavit and Ethan's consent, we bring it to court. Jordan agreed. I don't want to rip Jake apart, he said. But I won't be erased. Not again. Ethan signed the paperwork the same day. Amber didn't take it well. There were texts, voicemails, long, fractured messages full of half-threats and guilt. You think she's doing this for Jake? She just wants to win. She's always resented me. This is her revenge. You're choosing a woman who abandoned you when you were a kid. The last one cut deepest. I had never abandoned Ethan. I had let him go. There's a difference. Sometimes you let someone make their own mistake because they need to learn how to come back on their own. Amber kept pushing. She tried to access the equity in the house. That's when she learned it had been frozen. Elaine had filed the paperwork quietly. No announcements, no drama. Amber called me that night. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She just said, "You think you've won. But all you've done is ruin everything." I didn't respond. Because it wasn't about winning. It was about stopping the lie from growing roots. Jake deserved better. And so did I. A month later, the court hearing was set. Not for the custody itself, but for a review of evidence. Elaine prepared 3 binders. One for my financial contribution. One for Jordan's DNA match. And one for the patterns, texts, posts, emails, that showed Amber's intent to manipulate, isolate, and erase. Ethan testified. So did Jordan. I didn't speak. I sat in the courtroom in a navy dress, hands folded in my lap. Amber showed up late. Hair curled, makeup flawless. She smiled too much. The judge was quiet. Then, after reviewing the files, she issued a temporary block on Amber's relocation. The child will remain in Maine pending further evaluation. Amber looked at Ethan like he'd struck her. He didn't flinch. After the hearing, we stood in the parking lot. The air smelled like wet pavement and the beginnings of fall. Ethan turned to me. I didn't know how much I didn't know. You do now, I said. He nodded. Then walked away without asking for anything. That night I baked. Not a cake. Just a loaf of banana bread. The kitchen filled with a warmth I hadn't felt in months. I left a slice by the window. No note. In the morning it was gone. Some things don't need words. Some peace arrives slowly like bread rising. Not loud. But sure. It began with phone calls. From people I hadn't spoken to in years. Ethan's old soccer coach. A second cousin I only saw at funerals. An old friend from church who now lived in North Carolina. Each one said the same thing in different ways. I heard you're going through something. Amber said you might be struggling. We're praying for you. She was building a narrative. Crafting it with care. She called it concern. But it was control. Amber began telling people I was unstable. That I was grieving too deeply, unable to let go. That I had grown paranoid. That my memory was fading. She said I was confusing Jake. That I was showing up unannounced, demanding time, ignoring boundaries. All of it a lie. Kept to my schedule. Picked Jake up on the designated days. Never stayed longer than planned. Never crossed a line. But Amber wasn't trying to prove anything in court. She was trying to win outside of it. She knew truth was slow. But rumor moved fast. A neighbor stopped waving. A PTA parent I once chatted with turned away at the store. At the library, the children's librarian spoke more carefully around me, as if waiting for me to forget where I was. Then came the visit from Child Protective Services. A woman named Rochelle knocked at my door with a badge and a soft voice. She said there had been a report of elder abuse and possible financial exploitation. Not against me. Against Ethan. She said the claim came anonymously. But I knew. Rochelle asked questions. Looked around my apartment. Took notes. Left with a stack of photocopies I had prepared weeks earlier. Statements. Schedules. Legal filings. The binder Elaine told me to always keep updated. You seem organized, Rochelle said at the door. I've had practice, I replied. A week later the report was closed. Unfounded. Still the stain lingered. That was the point. Amber didn't need me arrested. She needed me questioned. Then Ethan received a summons. Amber had filed a police report against him. Claimed he'd coerced her into signing custody agreements. That he'd been aggressive. That he was working in concert with me to destabilize her. The officer who interviewed him was polite. Methodical. But even he looked uncomfortable. It didn't stick. There were records. Voicemails. Emails. Witnesses. Elaine forwarded the transcripts to the DA. And within a week, Amber was called in for questioning herself. She stopped responding to messages. Stopped posting on social media. Her lawyer filed a motion to delay the next court date. Cited medical stress. Elaine leaned back in her chair when she read it. She's out of cards, she said. All she has left is the illusion of fragility. I didn't celebrate. Matey. Took out my journal. Wrote 3 lines. Amber erased the past. Amber tried to rewrite the present. Amber forgot I keep records. The next morning I got a call from the courthouse. The judge had reviewed the latest filings and was moving the final hearing date up. It would all be decided soon. Custody, the visitation, the truth. I walked to the bay that afternoon. Sat on the bench Jake used to climb on to pretend he was a pirate. I watched the water. Didn't cry. Didn't smile. Just breathe. Elaine called me later with one last update. There's been a recommendation. The DA is considering pressing charges for filing a false report against Amber. Closed my eyes. Not out of relief, but because for the first time I felt still. That night, Ethan came over with Jake. No warning. Just knocked, the way he used to in college, when he needed a meal or a place to talk. Jake ran in with his arms wide. "Grandma!" I held him. He smelled like rain and peanut butter. Ethan stood in the doorway. "She moved out." "Where?" "California, I think." Said she needed distance. He nodded. He didn't ask to stay. But they did. That night, I read Jake a story about a fox who loses its way in the woods, only to find its den again by following the stars. When he fell asleep, I sat by the window. The stars were faint, but they were there. They always had been. You just had to look up. The final hearing was held in a quiet courtroom with dull carpet and a view of the courthouse parking lot. Nothing grand. Just neutral beige walls and chairs that creaked if you shifted wrong. I arrived early. Sat with my hands in my lap. Elaine sat beside me, reading over notes she already knew by heart. Amber walked in last. Alone. No makeup. No performance. Just a woman stripped down to the last version of herself she could manage. She didn't look at me. Didn't look at Ethan either. The judge entered. Everyone stood. Then the facts were read. Jordan's DNA results. Ethan's testimony. My visitation petition. The false accusations. Timeline. Amber was given a chance to speak. She declined. The judge called for a recess. When we returned, the decision came swiftly. Ethan was granted full custody. Jordan retained visitation rights at the court's discretion, pending a slow integration. I was granted formal grandparent rights, structured, consistent, and recognized by law. Amber was reprimanded for false reporting and referred to the district attorney for review. There were no outbursts, no tears, no yelling, just ink on paper, a truth notarized. Afterward, we didn't go out to celebrate. We didn't pop champagne. We went home. I baked cinnamon muffins. Jake iced them with too much sugar. Ethan brewed coffee. We sat around the table and didn't talk about court. We talked about school and cartoons, and whether or not the leaves would turn gold early this year. And then they left. And I stood at the sink, watching the light fade against the tile. Nothing had changed and everything had. Amber moved to California a week later. Sent a single email. "I hope one day Jake understands why I did what I did." I didn't reply. Because I wasn't interested in her legacy. I was interested in my own. I started painting again. Nothing serious. Just little watercolors. Trees, birds, a cracked teacup on a windowsill. Elaine bought me a new set of brushes. Said they looked expensive but weren't. I told her I appreciated the illusion. Ethan came by every Saturday. Sometimes he brought Jake, sometimes not. Sometimes he just sat quietly. No explanations. No apologies. Just presence. That was enough. Jake started calling me from school. Little updates. We made applesauce. I got a star on my reading chart. Dad says you make the best muffins. One afternoon, he asked why Amber didn't live with them anymore. Pause. Then I said, because some people choose to start over. And some people choose to stay. He nodded like he understood something. I didn't need him to know the details. I just needed him to feel steady. Months passed. The garden began to recover. I planted rosemary again. Not because it was useful but because it smelled like home. I stopped attending family gatherings. Not out of spite. Just because I no longer felt the need to explain myself to people who hadn't asked. I joined a book club. Hosted a soup night once a month. Started journaling again. I made a new list. Things I know now. Silence isn't weakness. Distance can be healing. Some stories don't need to be retold. And one more. Love doesn't mean surrender. This life, this chapter is mine. No shadows. No roles I didn't choose. No gratitude demanded in exchange for dignity. Just peace. Real. Earned. Quiet. The kind you don't perform. The kind you live. The last time I saw Amber, it was on the news. Mugshot. She'd been arrested for attempting to defraud a real estate buyer in California. I didn't read the article. I didn't need to. Because I was sitting in my kitchen, sipping tea, watching the rosemary catch light on the windowsill. Jake was in the next room, building something from blocks. Ethan was fixing a cabinet door that had never quite hung right. And I was whole. Not restored. Redefined. I didn't need to be called grandma to feel love. I didn't need to be invited to feel welcome. I didn't need to be needed to feel alive. I had finally come home. To myself.